The DNA of Harrison Harding is within the genes of many surnames of the many families that were raised in Kansas after the Civil War, such as the Hardings, the Givens, the Kibbles, the Raglands, the Quicks, the Gansons, the Bartleys, the Hayes, the Capletons, the Pearsons, the Kings, the Hunters, the Formans, the Cannons, the Smiths, the Pierces, and many other surnames that have incorporated the genetic makeup of Harrison and Thomas Harding. Historical documents show that Harrison is also known as Hon Harding, was born in Virginia between the years 1819 and 1821. His 1850 slave schedule places his birth in the year 1820, the 1870 census puts his birth at 1820, and the records indicate that he was born in the state of Virginia. But the 1880 census puts his birth in Tennessee, the 1900 census also places his birth in Virginia, and also in the year 1821 in the month of November. The most likely place of his birth is in the state of Virginia. What we know for certain is that Harrison Harding was enslaved in Tennessee when the Civil War broke out. He was around 45 years old, give or take 2 years. According to the obituary of his son Thomas Harding, Harrison and his wife Phyllis were living in the state of Arkansas during the time of Thomas Harding's birth, in 1843. The obituary also mentions that the family moved to Tennessee when Thomas Harding was 4 years old. I have powerful evidence that suggests that the slave owner of the plantation in Arkansas where Harrison and Phyllis Harding was raising their son Thomas had died in the same year that Thomas was born. I have strong evidence that suggests that the slave owner was a man that went by the name Giles Harding. Giles Harding was born in Goochland County, Virginia, in the year 1784, and he died in Nashville, Tennessee in 1843, again, the same year in which Thomas Harding was born. According to Maureen Vaughn, the curator for the Belmead Historical Site of the Harding Plantation, located in Davidson County, Nashville, Tennessee. In regard to the property of Giles Harding, quote, there is a Harrison in the bills of sale, however, a Harrison was listed in the estate inventory of Giles Harding, 1784 to 1843, which was dated to 1845. As part of dissolving Giles Harding's assets, all of the enslaved were sold, and this document shows that 2 people, Harrison and Sam, were sold together for $1,772. It does not disclose the buyer, but the bill of sale would probably be under the name of his son, Giles Scales Harding, who was his executor. End quote. At that time, Giles Harding owned a large home in Barfield, Rutherford County, Tennessee, which is less than 5 miles south of Murfreesboro, directly west of Barfield Golf Course, south of the Turning Point Church, on the east side of Barfield Crescent Road, near the intersection of Barfield Crescent Road and Barfield Road. I believe that this is the location that Harrison Harding was taken to when they separated him from his son Thomas. In the will of Giles Harding, he has 4 people listed: 2 brothers, John Harding and Thomas Jefferson Harding, and 2 sons, Giles Scales Harding and William Harding. It is not known if Thomas Harding, the son of Harrison, had the name Thomas at his birth. However, it is not abnormal for a slave that changes hands to be renamed by their new slave owner. For this reason, the research concerning the whereabouts of Thomas Harding is going to start with Thomas Jefferson Harding, the brother of Giles Harding, who personally made Thomas Jefferson Harding one of the beneficiaries of his estate. On August 1, 1863, Harrison Harding enlisted into the United States military and became a part of the 12th Infantry Regiment of the United States Colored Troops, Company K. After getting sick, his eyesight became foggy, and he was temporarily transferred to the 101st U.S.C.T. His name can be found in the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C., plaque number B27. The 12th United States Colored Infantry was an infantry regiment that served in the Union Army during the American Civil War. The regiment was composed of former slaves that were called contraband when they enlisted, and they were commanded by white officers, authorized by the Bureau of Colored Troops, which was created by the United States War Department on May 22, 1863. The 12th U.S. Colored Infantry was recruited in Tennessee from July 24 through August 14, 1863, and mustered in for 3 years of service under the command of Colonel Charles Robinson Thompson. The regiment was attached to defenses of Nashville and the Northwestern Railroad Department of the Cumberland to October 1864. Also the 2nd Colored Brigade, District of the Etowah, Department of the Cumberland, to January 1865. Defenses of Nashville and the Northwestern Railroad District of Middle Tennessee, to May 1865. And 3rd Subdistrict, Middle Tennessee, Department of the Cumberland, to January 1866. On November 1, 1863, Thomas Harding enlisted into the 14th Infantry Regiment of the U.S.C.T. Company C, 3 months after his father Harrison enlisted. Thomas Harding was memorialized with a plaque that is a part of the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C. Plaque number B31. Both Harrison Harding and his son Thomas Harding fought in the Battle of Nashville against the Confederate General John Bell Hood. In command of the Union troops in the Tennessee Theater was Major General George H. Thomas. Under his command was Major General John Schofield. Schofield was ordered by General Thomas to begin an attack on Hood's right flank, but that this attack was to be a fake attack. General Thomas believed that General Hood would move troops from his left flank to support his right flank, and in so doing, he would weaken his left flank. The left flank was to be the real point of attack. Schofield then ordered Colonel Thomas Jefferson Morgan to his tent to orchestrate the fake attack on Hood's right flank. Colonel Thomas Morgan was already in charge of the 14th U.S.C.T., which Thomas Harding had enlisted into, but General Schofield also gave him 3 more regiments. One of those regiments was the 12th Regiment that Harrison Harding had enlisted into. There they were, father and son, on the same battlefield, under the command of the same colonel, all preparing to fight against rebellious people who were hell-bent on killing anyone who would get in the way of the money that they were making off of the backs of slaves. And now, after hundreds of years, these rebels are now face to face with their former slaves and the United States military might. The only question now is, do the rebels want slavery more than slaves want freedom? History is proof of the answer to this question. After the war was over, Harrison Harding went to District 10 in Nashville, and his son Thomas went to District 2. Thomas Jefferson Harding, the brother of Giles Harding who died in 1843, lived in District 13 in the year 1860, some 4 years before the Battle of Nashville. Today this area is called North Nashville. Thomas Harding, the son of Harrison Harding, was living in District 2, in Davidson County in 1870, just 5 years after the Civil War. This area is located east of Nashville, between the Cumberland River and Stones River, in the area of Two Rivers Park. Harrison Harding was living in District 10, in the year 1870, which is located in the area of Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where the John Rich Football Practice Complex is today. The Ku Klux Klan, commonly known as the KKK or the Klan, is an American white supremacist hate group that primarily targeted former slaves after the Civil War had ended. The first Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, just 75 miles south of Nashville, on December 24, 1865, by 6 former officers of the Confederate Army, Frank McCord, Richard Reed, John Lester, John Kennedy, J. Calvin Jones, and James Crow. Although there was little organizational structure above the local level, similar groups rose across the South and adopted the same name and methods. Klan groups spread throughout the South as an insurgent movement promoting resistance and white supremacy during the Reconstruction era. After fighting for freedom, and also to save the United States of America, the former slaves were given the right to vote. But the Southern states reorganized under the hoods of the Southern clans and began terrorizing the former slaves all over the United States. The Memphis Massacre of 1866, the New Orleans Massacre of 1866, the massacre in Camilla, Georgia in 1868, the Opelousas Massacre in 1868, the Colfax Massacre in 1873, the Coushatta Massacre of 1874, the Hamburg Massacre in 1876, the Ellington Massacre in 1876, and then there is the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. All of these massacres were directed at the formerly enslaved populations throughout America. The South had risen again, but because they swore never to pick up arms against the United States, but to pick up arms against the formerly enslaved, and the abolitionists that wanted an end to slavery. There was no such promise, and I have said nothing about the many hundreds of lynchings that took place every year. It would be of no surprise to me if the undocumented lynchings were in the thousands per year. The formerly enslaved populations began migrating to safer places. Most would find the absence of the Klan near Union forts all throughout the South, staying near the forts for protection. During the rise and terror of the Klan, Harrison Harding was a pastor at the St. James Baptist Church in Nashville, which had 210 members. There is ample evidence to support the idea that Pastor Harding may have worked with Benjamin Singleton in orchestrating the largest exodus since Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt. Benjamin Pap Singleton was an American activist and businessman best known for his role in establishing African American settlements in Kansas. A former slave from Tennessee who escaped to freedom in Ontario, Canada in 1846, he soon returned to the United States, settling for a period in Detroit, Michigan. He became a noted abolitionist, community leader, and spokesman for African American civil rights. Singleton returned to Tennessee during the Union occupation in 1862, but soon concluded that blacks would never achieve economic equality in the white-dominated South. After the end of Reconstruction, Singleton organized the movement of thousands of black colonists, known as exodusters, to found settlements in the Free State of Kansas. A prominent voice for early black nationalism, he became involved in promoting and coordinating black-owned businesses in Kansas and developed an interest in the Back to Africa movement. In the summer of 1877, Singleton led approximately 73 black settlers to Cherokee County near the town of Baxter Springs. Once the settlers arrived, they began negotiating with the Missouri River, Fort Scott, and Gulf Railroad for land to build their proposed Singleton colony. Their timing was late, as rich lead deposits had been discovered in the area the previous year, which led to a mining boom and caused land prices to rise too high for their funds. Without the ability to buy land, they could not create a colony in Cherokee County. Singleton began looking elsewhere. He searched for government land that his settlers could acquire through the 1862 Homestead Act. He found some available land on what had been the former Kaw Indian Reservation near the town of Dunlap, Kansas, on the borders of Morris and Lyon counties. Dunlap was situated along the tracks of the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad, familiarly called the Katy Railroad, which extended into Kansas from Missouri. The land was marginal, but in the spring of 1878, Singleton settlers left Middle Tennessee for Kansas via steamboats on the Cumberland River. The following year, they officially established the Dunlap Colony. More than 2,400 settlers emigrated from the Nashville and Sumner County areas. Most settlers lived in dugouts during their first year on the Great Plains. They stuck it out and made the colony a success. By 1879, of the Great Exodus, 50,000 freedmen known as exodusters had migrated from the South to escape poverty and racial violence following whites regaining political control across the former Confederacy. They migrated to Kansas, Missouri, Indiana, and Illinois seeking land, better working conditions, and the chance to live in peace. Part of Topeka, Kansas, was known as Tennessee Town because of many migrants from that state. Most had no direct connection with Singleton's organized colony movement, but Singleton and his followers were sympathetic to their plight. Many white Kansans began to object to the arrival of so many desperately poor blacks into their state. Singleton stepped forward to defend the exodusters' right to try to make better lives in the American West. In 1880, Singleton was requested to appear before the United States Senate in Washington, D.C., to testify on the causes of the Great Exodus to Kansas. Singleton rebuffed the efforts of Southern senators to discredit the Exodus movement. He testified to his own success in setting up independent black colonies and noted the terrible conditions which caused freedmen to leave the South. Singleton returned to Kansas as a nationally recognized spokesman for the exodusters. But the migration of so many poor blacks put more of a financial burden on the Dunlap colony than the original settlers could bear. By 1880, the Presbyterian Church had taken charitable control of the settlement. It planned to build a freedmen's academy in the town. Singleton had no more dealings with his colony at Dunlap. In 1881, Singleton was 72 years old, and most people referred to him affectionately as Old Pap. He was still a formidable figure and used his reputation to bring together blacks into an organization called the Colored United Links, CUL. The goal of the CUL, which he created in Topeka, was to combine the financial resources of all black people to build black-owned businesses, factories, and trade schools. The group held several conventions and was successful enough locally that Republican Party officials in Kansas became interested in its potential political strength. Presidential candidate James B. Weaver of the Greenback Party met with CUL leaders to discuss fusion between the two groups. After 1881, CUL membership faltered, however, and the organization soon fell apart. After the failure of the CUL, Singleton became convinced that blacks would never be allowed to succeed in the United States. It is believed that Harrison, his wife Phyllis, their son Thomas, his wife Nancy, and their first 4 children, all loaded up onto a ferry boat headed to Kansas sometime in the spring of 1879. Their youngest daughter, Emily, was born in Tennessee on January 9, 1878, and would have been a little over a year old. The 1880 census records Harrison, Phyllis, Thomas, Nancy, and their 4 children, Phyllis, Nancy, Harrison, and Emily, all living in Topeka, Shawnee, Kansas, at 219 Monroe Street. It also says that the occupation of Thomas Harding was that of a stonemason. Thomas Harding being a stonemason is indicative of the skilled workers that the slave-owning Harding families were famous for. Harrison and Thomas Harding lived out their lives in Kansas. Harrison added 2 branches to his tree. One with his wife Phyllis, through Thomas Harding, and one through his second wife, Millie Good. With Millie, he bore Harry Phoenix, who was born on May 8, 1897, and he married Dorothy, and together they had 6 children, Maxine, Harry, Darlene, Douglas, John, and James. Thomas Harding and his wife Nancy added 13 branches to the family tree. Phyllis, who was born in 1870, Nancy, who was born in 1874, and married Zachariah Ganson. Harrison was born on August 9, 1876, and married Mary Kelly. Emily was born on January 9, 1878. Rosetta Teness was born on March 12, 1882, and married John Warren Ragland. She was widowed, and married Mike Gibbons. James was born in March of 1884, and he married Marsh. Then there is Daniel, who was born on March 11, 1887, and he married Mildred Weyburn. There is Cora, who was born on October 4, 1889, and she married Eugene Kibble. Then we have Thomas Jr., who was born in March of 1892, and finally, we have Peggy, who was born on September 14, 1895, and married William Kibble. The Black Ancestry Network Group would like to thank you for listening to this family ancestral tree recording, or what we call the F.A.T recordings. If you have any questions concerning any missing or inaccurate information concerning this recording, please leave a comment. If you would like to listen to a F.A.T recording concerning any of the family members mentioned in this F.A.T recording, contact Thomas Smith at the Black Ancestry Network Group located on Facebook. Or, you can email the Black Ancestry Network Group at gmail.com. If you enjoyed this F.A.T recording content, please like and share, and don't forget to leave a comment if you have any concerns. If you are a member of the Black Ancestry Network Group on Facebook, please consider becoming a subscriber to the Bang YouTube channel. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so that you can be notified when any new content is uploaded to the channel. Thanks again for listening. Until the next F.A.T recording. Bang!